I have a very special guest today, Irena Tyshyna, 2 times award-winning intergenerational behavioral analyst, creator of the CODA methodology, and specialist in cognitive genetics. And before we started recording, you shared this beautiful quote with me that I'd like to share with everyone as well. Happiness is a correct use of life. What does that mean to you?
What does that mean to you?
I've never heard of this before you mentioned it to me. And it's like, what I instinctively thought was we all want to be happy, right? And like sometimes we chase happiness as a feeling rather than realizing that we are not in a state where we can allow happiness or experience happiness because of trauma or conditioning. So we're not in a place where we can authentically allow that into our experience. So look deep into yourself and see, can you actually allow happiness in?
That's a really interesting interpretation as well. To me, out of the, let's say, the entire sentence, and happiness is such a popular word, isn't it? Everybody talks about happiness, everybody talks about being happy, feeling happy, arriving to the spot and the place of happiness. To me personally, the key word in that sentence, and by the way, that's a quote of the founder of the original founder of the method, and a scientist and a doctor in physics and psychology who actually studied genetics. And that's something that he said about the method and about the purpose of developing that method, Dr. Deutsch. And to me, the key word in that sentence is use. Happiness is not a feeling. Happiness is not something that is sort of passively coming and washes over you and then goes away, and then we can't catch it, or then we have to catch it. It's not a sensation. It's an actionable use of life and the choices and the opportunities and the circumstances that have been placed on your plate. Because everybody understands happiness their own way, right? It's a very individual discussion. And I often jokingly say that, happiness is just overrated, this idea of being happy, because again, happiness is a feeling, just like any feeling. You feel hungry, then you feel tired, then you feel sleepy, then you feel ticklish. Feelings come and go. But this sense of using your life and having agency in that sense and making the most of life, and that's what people call fulfillment. That's what people call contentment. That's what people call purpose, because these are the words that they imply an active participation in life, not just sitting on the edge of the cliff and waiting for the happiness to come and enlighten you. So to me, this quote, I often have to remind myself, especially when I'm not feeling happy, that happiness is not a feeling, it's a use of life. And it's also a really good indication when you're not feeling there, when you're not feeling 100%, whether that's at work, whether that's in a relationship, whether you just woke up one day and just go, not today. What use can you apply, even if it's just one foot in front of another sometimes, to make that day a happy day for you?
Before, I would always chase an experience that would make me happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you were saying, a feeling. And so many people do that. So you would want to have a career that would make you happy, or you'd want to have a relationship that would make you happy, and only then you're happy. Or you want to travel somewhere, and I know I'll be happy there because I'm not happy here. Because there's a lot of this thing where people exist in the pursuit of happiness as a feeling, And then you kind of end up wasting your entire life in that. And obviously you can never be happy because it's always something else.
Well,
When it's a feeling.
exactly, feelings are designed to come and go away. It's just like chasing the waves in the at the ocean. I don't know. It's one of those sort of futile exercises. I don't believe that anybody ever arrived at that point of feeling happy, but feeling the sense of participating in happiness is something that gives the sense of active agency in life. So life automatically stops being passive, waiting for other things to happen, other people to come and rescue, other circumstances to, change your experiences or your interpretation of experiences, but actually wake up and go, okay, well, what is my agency in this? How can I make useful this situation, this day, this experience, etc., etc.
So what prompted the CODA gene methodology, and how does it relate to, what we're talking about?
The two names, one is a music term, and that's the nod to my first degree, because I have masters in music, and I studied 17 years and graduated as a conductor, and everything to this day, everything I know about life in terms of the shape of it, the understanding, the conducting and orchestration of life, and your story and your future, is all of that knowledge came from music. The other degree and the other passion turned profession of mine comes from the human behavior, from the genetic aspect of understanding why certain experiences happen to certain people and don't happen to somebody else. So again, that individual approach to life, to stop blaming the circumstances and again start finding what agency can be applied in a person's individual story. I think that's very, very important. Again, to remind yourself that you always have an opportunity to act upon something rather than sit and feel helpless, because that's what I think the majority of people struggle and suffer and have painful experiences when they feel helpless in life. If you listen to the podcasts or read books on trauma, the actual trauma, whether that's kind of intergenerational trauma or just something that happened to you, doesn't have to be like anything major. It's not the experience, because people are normally very resilient. We as individual children are very resilient, but it's that sense of helplessness in the situation where it felt that there was nothing that can be done and there was nothing that you can do. You just sat in that pain. And that's effectively how any trauma, any memory, any sort of haunted experience that happened to anyone, that's where it originates from, is that sense of helplessness. When you flip that idea and that concept on its head and you go, well, actually, through action, through agency, through engagement, comes that sense of, okay, I can do something, I can contribute, I can make an impact. You may not necessarily be happy as a sort of your ideal picture or kind of this sort of a Disney painting of what happiness looks like, but you will feel less in pain simply because the feeling of being able to do something and the feeling of agency was still within an individual person.
That idea of intergenerational trauma and trauma basically that you don't have access to in terms of knowledge. So it's not like, oh yeah, because my mom was screaming at me. No, it goes deeper, right? So it goes through generations, and you can't really have an awareness of where your problems maybe come from, because you need to really go and work with someone and get access to that information.
you said when my mom was screaming, and mom was screaming is not the trauma, is the consequence of something else, is the consequence of a different feeling, whether that's connected with pain, whether that's connected with fear. That's what we carry within ourselves genetically. We carry a certain predisposition to interpreting events a certain way, and we keep those past memories that may not necessarily happen in your lifetime, because the reason, and it's sort of become more and more mainstream now, everybody seems to have a therapist or somebody that they've at least spoke to once to discuss things, you have counseling at school, etc., etc. But the classic sort of therapy only touches on the stages of childhood, for example, right? Do you remember what happened to you? Oh, I remember this happened, or I remember that happened. Nobody actually goes further down underneath, looking at the actual root that was, the foundations that were laid down before you were even born. What happened during pregnancy, when your mom carried you, the experiences, the feelings that she had, including even the news when she found out that she was about to have a baby. All of that has a huge impact on the future, let's say, predisposition, right? We all have this sort of programming that fine-tunes and sort of focuses the lens on certain experiences that we will be directed towards. This is not a point of determinism. This is not a blame game. It's like, oh, now I understand. Now I didn't know who to blame before. Now it's definitely my mother. Or, oh, it's the dad. I knew it was always going to be him. The purpose of understanding this, and the purpose of understanding this on a deeper level, and we're looking at genetic experiences and the genetic memories that go down to 4 generations. I've been to some conferences and some seminars where they say, well, it's not actually 4, it's 7. Somebody mentioned 13. Whatever it is, it's a long, long, long time of layered experiences that seem to have a certain common thread in each of the families. There's a reason why people go, well, in our family, there's always some trouble, financial trouble, or in our family, nobody seemed to be happy in the relationship, or there's genetically inherited physical conditions. This is a really beautiful example of showing how we as a baby, right, and when a baby is born, it has predispositions to certain physical conditions or illnesses, but they only develop later. And the reason they develop later is because a child who has this sort of loaded gun by way of carrying these genetics, right, as the seeds that haven't been planted yet, then is born into the family. The family has a certain way of living life, there's certain belief systems. A child is exposed to certain experiences, right? When he or she is able to witness firsthand, okay, so this is what life looks like, this is what life sounds like, this is the interpretation of my family, this is what they say, this is what the world is. And so that becomes the perfect storm where you have the seed of predisposition and you have the perfect soil, the perfect ground for planting that seed. And then after a certain point, you start having, there's a number of genetically inherited diseases that now the classic sort of medical doctors just go, oh, okay, well, it runs in the family. The genetic cancer, the genetic poor eyesight, I don't know, kidney situations or thyroid or issues with the immune system. All of that is effectively the perfect storm, a combination of understanding what I was born with, as in what were the predispositions, and also what I contributed by creating the perfect environment for these conditions to flourish, to take root, to start growing. The same thing applies. The reason it's called mental genetics or cognitive genetics is with our bodies we can see. right? We can see, we have machines, we can get the full diagnostics. With the mind, it's more complicated, because unless you're going through this sort of MRI scans and neuroscience, which is now a fairly young, let's say, subcategory of studying human biology and genetics, we haven't had an opportunity to explore that, because we have to rely on people's interpretation of what happened. When I have clients coming through my door at my practice, it's a form of talking therapy. So there's a lot of, well, this is what happened, and these are the family legends, right? I was told my grandmother had this experience, or I was told my granddad was in the war, or whatever happened. And then we, just like forensics, arrive at the crime scene and then go, okay, well, I can see the shard of glass, I can see the scuffs there, I can see the sort of, we put together a picture, and it's not always in line with what the family has been convincingly so telling, these sort of stories to their next generation. When we examine all of that, and then we put together a genogram, which is effectively this family tree type map, where we can easily trace the origin of a certain deviation, right, from happiness, the survival behind it, because every painful experience needs to be explained somehow, because if your husband just left you, it doesn't really explain anything. But if you say, well, my husband left me because all men are evil, it's like, yeah, that makes sense, and I'm going to say that to my daughter, and my daughter's going to say that to her daughter, and we're going to protect ourselves from further pain through having that conclusion in our family about men or women. It's trying to unwind the clock, unwind see how it's that genetic spiral, but you're sort of going literally anti-clockwise, just going down and getting to the point where you go, okay, this is where it all started, and this is where the deviation happened, and now we have an understanding, now we have a new interpretation, and now we have a solution to how to rewrite your past, and therefore you can rewrite your future, because with new understanding you attract different people, you attract different situations, you're no longer using the bricks of the past to build a house of the future, because you're able to bring in a completely different material and design your own perfect temple of happiness.
It's funny because in my own family, there is one belief that is, I would say, the strongest of them all negative beliefs, and it's unlucky.
Unlucky.
Oh,
beautiful.
yes. There's maybe something cultural there, because Eastern European background, you do have quite a lot of negative thinking there, and like lack of agency. But in my family, it's like, we are unlucky. We are unlucky. I don't even know what I want because I'm unlucky, so why would I even think about that? Because I'm unlucky. And that's what you hear, and that's how people behave, and that's how people relate to you through their
misery.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Shared misery. Yeah. Friends in misery. This is all too familiar to me. I grew up with with my mum. That was her mantra, to the point where it wasn't observational. It was like an active search for more evidence to basically say, you see, I told you I was unlucky. You see, I knew that on the airplane they would run out of juice, as they would just come to me. I told you that so it became a lifelong pursuit of further evidence to show, to prove, and therefore to exempt yourself from any responsibility for the future architecture of your life. Because it's like, well, you can't blame me, and you can't ask me for any responsibility, because that was just the cards I was dealt, and I'm sitting here and I suffer proudly. And there is an element of vanity in this, because there's a lot of people that actually their pain and suffering is so deeply attached to their identity that trying to explain that they don't have to be suffering and in pain would literally mean the death of who they believe they are at their core. And so with every new you, and I've lived through those experiences myself, when I refer to, the old me, the 20-year-old me, the 30-year-old me, I'm not going to say how old I am, but the 10-year-old me, you almost refer to like a completely different person with completely different ideas of what she liked, what she found attractive, what she found exciting, what she found threatening, what she found uncomfortable. And to build the new you, you have to go through the process of death and rebirth, because there is no rebirth without the experience of death. And it's terrifying. And that is why many people never, ever, ever change their situation, because their familiar pain is less scary than the unfamiliar, the loss of their identity and the unfamiliar journey into the sort of the open, I don't know what this could become. At least, the devil, better the devil, this is the expression. People do stay in unhappy relationships. People do stay in mediocre jobs. People do still live 15 minutes away from, the primary school and, the family home, because it's kind of like, yeah, it's not great, but at least I know what I'm dealing with. Because the idea of that death of the old identity is far greater for them than the excitement of the possibility of what could be born from that, from those ashes.
We can get so attached to the narrative we have for ourselves, because in a way there's comfort in the trauma, right? I mean, I feel lonely, so that feels like a comforting thought right now, because I know that I've been abandoned. So I have been abandoned. There's like almost pride there in that. I'm like, I'm comfortable in this. Like, I'm a warrior who's been abandoned or something like that. You do become quite protective of that.
Of course. But also, look, the desire to complain, or let's say the need to complain, is also inherited. We know now that happiness is inherited, the misery is inherited. Taking pride in suffering, we all come from the sort of former Soviet bloc, where hard work was a badge of honor. It was a badge of honor. I remember one of my first boyfriends, and I remember sort of complaining about something, and I said, look at my hands, they're all scratchy, they're scruffy. I mean, that's me being 18 years old. And he said, look, you should be proud of those hands. That means that you're hardworking. At the time I didn't have anything to say. Now I would have plenty to say for a comment like that, especially coming from a man who's sort of pitching a tent to be your partner. But this is this kind of like, you should be proud.
Yeah.
You should be proud of how hard you work, how long, the long hours, the sort of, oh, I only have 1 meal a day and a cold cup of tea at the end. Motherhood is difficult, relationships are difficult, everything is difficult, everything is hard, and look how much I'm suffering. And therefore, my sort of martyr positioning is secured because nobody suffers more than I do. There is an element of vanity, because if you can't succeed in success, you want to succeed in misery, right? Because that's basically another way of competing and saying, no, I am the ultimate victim here, right? The classic description of victimhood mentality is literally that, is that your identity is so deeply connected to the sense of being forever wronged and forever up against some major hurdles, and not knowing, not wanting to take responsibility, but also not trying to dig deep, because it's ugly. When we start opening up, the sort of old genetic treasure chests that we've inherited from our family, to do the job properly. And I'm not talking about positive thinking. Positive thinking, in my eyes, is like, buying a brand new crispy dress that you've just seen in the window shop, going, oh my God, I love that. That's going to make me look so great. But you haven't taken the shower. You haven't cleaned yourself. So it's only going to be a matter of time until that dress, the beautiful, clean, white, spotless, smelling fresh and good, is going to become the same as the dress you are wearing, because you've not changed your habits. You are still living the same experiences. That's why visualization works only if you do the inner work. Manifestation works only as a, let's say, lipstick, on top of all the other sort of cleansing that you've done. And that is why many people seem to have this sort of the never-ending journey of enlightenment and self-improvement, going from one seminar to another symposium to reading some books. There's sort of like, the big books, the libraries. It's like they're listening to of the podcasts, but nothing changes. This sort of consumer mentality. Oh, that will fix me, because if I buy that dress, I'm gonna look good. If I read this book, that book will fix me, without the desire and the readiness and let's roll up the sleeves and open this old stinky box that I've been trying to ignore and hide somewhere under the floorboards. A real spiritual work, real journey of evolution and enlightenment is not sitting on the top of a mountain in a lotus position and talking to the butterflies. It's full on. And sometimes maybe it's, vodka and cigarettes, and sometimes maybe it's screaming into the pillow, and sometimes it's, I'm done, I don't know what else to do. And that's when breakthrough happens, because that's how we develop the grit. That's how we know what we are made out of. There's a really beautiful book, we studied that as part of our school curriculum, and it's called How the Steel Was Tempered. Как закалялась сталь. And it's a story about the Second World War, and sort of a war hero. But this is how you temper the steel. This is what become, the iron in its rawest, rarest form is a very brittle material. You turn it into a samurai sword only through extreme conditions, being in the fire, putting it into the ice cold water, hammering it down and turning it into a beautiful piece of art. It has to go through the tempering process. There is no shortcut. There is no copy-paste experience. It's your personal, individual journey, and that's how people get to understand who they are. But they also get to understand what life is about, the happiness, that sweet spot of going, okay, what is it that life is to me? What is it that happiness is to me? Not the big pretty poster or some Instagram meme. That is my understanding. And we can talk pretty words and do all the sort of the motivational, inspirational, quotational, but without the sweat, without the work, without the unpleasant aspect of sitting with it in the truth of what is actually happening, there is no progress. There is no progress.
Talking about progress, I want to mention something that's extremely relevant to me. It's something we talked about before we recorded, and you mentioned that a lot of your clients come women in their 30s and they're looking for a relationship, a fulfilling relationship. I was like, oh, this, I feel so seen. This is like so me because I'm looking for the same thing. So maybe let's talk about relationships.
Let's talk about relationships. I always jokingly say, I see myself as this sort of the Patsy, Auntie Patsy character, and absolutely fabulous. They're just like going, right, I've lived my life and I've made so many stories, and with stories come the experiences, and now I can turn it into an entertaining conversation and a joke, and it's like, well, a couple of husbands later, or there was this party, but all of that came with a lot of bumps and bruises as well. But ultimately, I think it's important to mention that I left home when I was 14, a baby, really a kid, and I went to study at the music college in a different city. That was in the day where there were no mobile phones, no credit cards, no, you had to go to the post office to order a phone call.
Yes, I remember that.
To speak with your mom, and hopefully she will be at home because it's the landline. Yeah. And if she's not at home, it's like, oh my God, now I have. And so I was able to have a 10-minute phone conversation, which basically was me just crying into the speaker and and her going, do you want to come home? Basically. And every time she would say, okay, fine, just come home. And I'm like, no. But really, 10 minutes once a week, I would just have this sobbing in a booth of a post office, me and my mum's voice at the other end. But I really, really, really needed somebody, a guide, a mentor. There's so many pretty words that they sort of describe that person, but really somebody, a person, a woman who would understand what I'm going through, but also would help me see the light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes the tunnel felt like it was never gonna end. So today, I want to be the person I so desperately needed when I was a teenager, or in my 20s, and I didn't have anyone to talk to, and I didn't have a trusted voice, somebody that I knew had my best interests at heart as well, not just have me on a payroll as a therapist. And it's like, okay, well, the hour is up. I have another client. I mentioned that to you before, 20, 30 years ago, when my mom was raising me, there was no access to any information. So people perhaps suffered, or whatever you want to call it, the mistakes that were made, or let's say the experience that we had, were due to the lack of information. There were no parenting books, there were no relationships books, there were just literature from, you just read about relationships from the Bronte sisters, the novels, yeah. Which is not necessarily helpful.
Yeah, no.
I just went to see Wuthering Heights movie.
No.
It's not helpful. No. It's pretty. It's 2 hours of popcorn. I'm like, okay, let's dream romantics, yeah. But it's not helpful. It it's not applicable. Today, I think we suffer from the opposite issue, and that is too much information, too many different opinions, too many people going, just literally shouting above one another, going, no, do this. Oh, no, tell him that. No, don't tell him. for men and women, by the way. I'm obviously very opinionated woman and I have a lot of personal experiences to share to back up my views, because they haven't been formed through reading a book and now I know everything, or through getting a diploma. It's like, well, now I'm a certified qualified and whatnot. These were the years of condensing personal experiences, personal conclusions, having a belief system, then changing that belief system and going, okay, I don't believe that was the right way of doing things. I don't believe I went about the right way. So there's a lot of personal experience which you cannot fake through simply reading a 50-page ebook that you just bought on Amazon and call yourself an expert. So there's a lot of observation that and I will never say, well, this is my way is the only way, or my method is the only method, but it's always backed up with some serious research, scientific research on neuroscience, on biology, on human behavior, on psychology, mixed with a practical, personal, felt it, done it, been there, bought the t-shirt, bought another t-shirt experience where I can show up and show off my personal collection, right, of situations where it's like, look, I've been there, I know how you feel, I know what to do now, because this is what I would have done if I were you back then, 10, 20 years ago. So yes, a majority of my clients are young women who want to understand, women who want to grow, women who have confusion over which voice to follow, which person's convincing, because everyone seems to be so confident and so convincing, but being confident and being competent, as we know, are two very different things. And also because life is so individual and so unique, what works for you doesn't work for the other person. Why? Because you have genetically unique fingerprint of an experience already sort of preloaded within you. So saying that one size fits all therapy is the way forward is just simply incorrect. We live in the times where I go and I have my bespoke facial depending on my skin type. I can go and have my hair color specifically specifically mixed for my hair type, for my hair natural hair shade, for my, I don't know, ethnic everything is bespoke. Tailored suits, tailored experiences, tailored holidays, everything. When it comes to therapy, it's like, well, this is it. This is the scientific research. This is one publication. Go and be successful or be happy. Why would you do that in 2026, where when we realize that there's so much is the nature and nurture? You can't possibly, well, it's also chemistry. It's like saying, well, I have baking soda, and so baking soda is gonna like make everything go incredibly well. It's like, okay, well, if you mix baking soda with vinegar, you have one reaction. If you mix it with milk, it's a completely different reaction. So just because you've created this formula for baking soda therapy doesn't mean that it's going to be so fantastically successful with everybody. And yes, you will have a lot of great reviews on your website, and I have them as well. People going, this is amazing, this was incredible, I wish I found out about that before. But also there's people who are not the vinegar, and the baking soda experiment didn't work for them, and they need to go and find their own truth and find their own experiences and find their own words that resonate with them and with their genetically predisposed, let's say, view of the world.
We were talking about my view of the world as well.
What is your view? What is your view?
We're talking about relationship, how it was, or it is, that there is something about being in your 30s, right? If you haven't had children and if you want to have children, and you're looking at a completely different thing too when you're in your 20s, for example. You want to have someone to have a family with.
Yeah.
And if you're also ambitious yourself, you want someone who will understand that at the same time. So there's a lot of things there, right?
A lot of things that you want, or a lot of things that you believe you need to be achieving because this is something that the world is shouting at you.
Maybe both. It's
so. I have bad news for you. You can't have it all. Here's the T-shirt that I bought. You cannot have it all.
I do sometimes actually wonder what's more important, or how I would want someone to meet me. Listen, I'm not exactly clear in that, and also I don't know if I need to be clear and specific to that level. So, obviously I want someone who will be a great dad because I want to have children. But I also want someone who is entrepreneurial and positive and optimistic and, kind, obviously. That's kind of thing. But
I think we should start with kind, yes. And we should also look at the genetic history. Definitely. If you ask me now, what would be the most important decision retrospectively for me is the decision to have children, but also the decision to have children with somebody who will give them half of their DNA. Thank God they have my intelligence, because apparently intelligence is inherited through the mom.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So that became sort of that was uncompromised, but yeah, no. I would say deciding to have children with somebody is probably one of the key decisions you will have to make in life. Yeah. And by the way, and I know that comes with, well, in which case nobody is perfect. It's like, no, not even you. Not even you. When I met my now ex-husband, and at the time, it felt like it was just this perfect meeting, right? Of the two people who were on exactly the same level, we were laughing at the same jokes, and we were liking the same music, and we were we see the world from exactly the same point of view. What I did not take into the account is also the fact that when we met at that seemingly perfect point, my trajectory was going up because I just arrived in the UK. I barely spoke English. Well, I thought my English was good, and then I arrived here and I realized that it actually was American English, and I don't understand the pronunciation, and everybody has really strong accents. It's like, what's going on? And the London slang and la 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 la. Just because you're meeting somebody at that perfect point doesn't mean that your trajectory is pointing the right way. So that's an important one to consider, because what I later realized is that, yes, the meeting point was perfect, and then I was going up and he was going down, and the gap widened to the point that 13 years later, you have absolutely nothing in common. You have completely different ambitions, completely different values, completely different stages of your life, career-wise, health-wise, ambition-wise, just so many things. And that is when the friction becomes unbearable, because what would get papered over at the early stages of relationships, because they just love his eyes, would become a non-negotiable in a partnership. And marriage is a business partnership, you go into, and you go, it's like a contractual, let's say, agreement. You go in, and then you have to have a conversation going, right, who's the CEO, who's the CFO, who's the PA, who's the driver, who's the cleaner, who look, there's jobs. And in the same way as people say, you don't go into a business partnership with your friends, because you may be the best friends, you may have exactly the same sense of humor and exactly the same preference in, I don't know, musical theatre, but in terms of the business, in terms of assigning the roles, understanding the roles, and also accountability for the jobs that you are taking on, because there's an understanding and there's an agreement, and there's also a promise. You have to remember that when a man proposes, you have to propose something. Like, what exactly are you proposing? Would you propose that we just don't date other people? Is that a proposal? Or what is the? It's a proposal of a project, right? An adventure. What exactly did you propose? What exactly are you offering? And a woman being the female, we're not just talking about gender roles, we're talking about the energy, right? We have the masculine sort of energy and the feminine energy, and we have both of them within ourselves. Is the feminine that responds and goes, yes, I like it, and accept, or no, that's not my thing. This is what a marriage, and doesn't have to be marriage, any partnership is about. It's about a proposal, a clear proposal, not just, and then we'll see. It's a clear proposal, yeah. And that is a very masculine energy. When we have these days, the reason this sort of the idea of men being so soft and feminine in the way is that confusion of why am I always the one offering? Where do we go? What shall we do? I understand that men also are very confused today about I don't want to be this dictator, right? The person that decides on everything. But I have a son and I have a daughter, and I have to think very carefully about what message am I giving them? How am I raising them? Because I want them to be quality people, right? I want my son to be a quality modern man who is kind, who is gentle, but also has structure. And that's a very masculine energy, right? Masculine provides structure. Masculine provides the black outline. Feminine colors it in. So feminine without the structure is just this sort of butterflies and rainbows and emotions and feelings and different weather forecasts, right? Masculine without feminine is just plain two-dimensional graph. It's a spreadsheet, right? So both energies, both even in a let's say it doesn't have to be a heterosexual relationship, but we're talking about energies. There has to be two opposite energies that are very complementary, because only then you have a beautiful multidimensional artwork of a relationship, rather than this is what I do and you should do the same. Women have to be structured. Women's quality is to color in, to bring in this sort of breath, right? Men bring a house, women make it a home. Men bring sperm, women make a baby. It's a very clear division of energetic input. And so if you want to be in your feminine, right, your girly, your feminine, not girly infantile, but girly as in that softness, that kindness, that care that men absolutely want and love to have, right? That's that softness that they don't get to have in their boys' world. they need to be able to come in and come with the structure. This is where I propose we're going. Not like one spot. Give 3 options. Give 3 options. There's no dictatorship. This is what I think we should do. This is what I would like us to, to commit to, rather than what do you think?
I'm going to think about that for myself. But thank you so much. And I'd like to know, where can people find you?
You can find me in London. I have 2 gorgeous practices. One is in Harley Street. The other one was in Belgravia. I've just moved recently. Now we are very, very conveniently close to Harrods in Knightsbridge. There's an opportunity to read a lot of information about my work on my website. It's www.coda-gene.com, and obviously all the social accounts as always. And hopefully you can find me more on being a guest on your podcast as well.